Bull Camper in the right place at the right time.
Joe Rose, touchdown Miami!
All right, Joe, let's back out to Pasture. And look, usually we get somebody on here that we're knuckleheads, but we're kind of in the same level. Now we're getting a smart guy now. We're getting this.
You're getting a good one.
This is our second
coast
author.
To coast.
Second author. We had Dave Barry first.
Yeah.
Now we've got another author. So we got a brainiac. So we got to raise our level a bit. We got to be a little bit more,
we got
more sophisticated, right?
We got a good one.
Well, he's a Bay Area guy, so we feel good about that.
Good stuff.
Yeah,
good stuff. Michael Silver. Mike Silver is great.
Michael Silver, 58 years old, so he fits.
He's in there, almost out the pasture, almost.
Sports writer, Sports Illustrated guy, currently with Bally Sports, Yahoo Sports, the NFL Network, San Francisco Chronicle, columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle.
Two things: San Francisco Chronicle and KMBR.
The first time I saw my name in the San Francisco Chronicle, I thought I was going to have an orgasm. But that was back.
I'm glad you did.
But that was back.
Well, I'm glad I wasn't around.
That was back when I was like 19 years old, and it was easy to have an orgasm. Let's bring him on, Michael Silver. How you doing, Michael?
We are already off the rails. This is incredible. By the way, I haven't worked for Bally Sports for a while. I don't even know if that exists.
I tried to get everything back in there. You don't need to be pumped up, but we kind of try to pump ourselves up, like to give you as many credentials as we can.
Listen, you want to start talking about orgasms right off the jump? I feel like I'm home. This is amazing. And of course, Joe went to the greatest academic institution known to man, and that's long established. And my helmet's up there, so there it is.
There you go.
But I feel like Cal not getting Kim, the pride of Milpitas, was a failure.
Well, I'll tell you,
especially during the Mike White years.
Well, yeah, Mike
White. Mike White could get anybody in that school back then.
It was Mike White. It was Mike White. It was Darryl Rogers, and I don't know who was the coach of Stanford, but he didn't get into that game that Mike White and Darryl Rogers had. So my high school coach.
I remember there was at one point there was talk in the '80s that Mike White might take an NFL job, and Bill Walsh, who was the coach of the 49ers, who knew Mike well, was asked, do you think Mike White would be able to, do well coaching pro players? And Bill said, well, my understanding is that Mike already has vast experience in that regard.
So my high school, years later, my high school coach told me, who had went to Cal, Jim Ferguson, played at Cal, and he played with Mike White, I think, right? Mike played. And so he kept telling me, he goes, Mike, I got this guy here. He goes, that can play. And Mike goes, no, I hear that from everybody. And so I ended up going to San Jose State. But that was a great time to play football back there. We had, I played it with against Steve Barkowski one year, Joe Roth the next year. Wow. Wesley Walker was there, Ted Albrecht, and one of the greatest football players I've ever played against, Chuck Muncie.
Steve Rivera,
I think, never had to go to class at Cal.
They say the lore when I got to Cal in the '80s was that Chuck Muncie's job in the summer, or maybe year round, was to sweep the snow off the steps of Harmon Gym. That's great work if you could get it, because I don't think there's ever been snowfall at Harmon Gym. Yeah, I think Steve Rivera, we had a run there.
Good guys.
Riv was there, you're
right. And the royal blue uniforms.
I think was it Steve's year or Joe Ross' year that you guys went to the Rose Bowl, didn't you? I think.
No, we almost went to the Rose Bowl, but Wendell Tyler fumbled 11 times in a rivalry game, and USC still couldn't beat them in John McKay's last game. And instead of going for the tie on fourth down, which would have sent Cal to the Rose Bowl, he went for it on fourth down, missed, and no Rose Bowl in my lifetime. But now that we're in the ACC with a big one coming up against Miami, I love our chances of getting to Pasadena.
How about that, huh?
Recruiting's going to get better now, exactly.
Yeah, would you ever think you would let's talk about that college football and where it's at right now. Would you ever think that you'd see UCLA, USC going there, and Cal going to the ACC and this and it, they look, in my opinion, between the conferences, between the NIL, between all this crap, they've absolutely just obliterated college football.
Yeah, the conference thing really, really upsets me. Just emotionally, like those are all like look what Oregon and Washington did. They left their in-state rivals.
Yeah.
You will hear me rip Stanford, like no one, but I don't hate them as much anymore because when we were faced with our sports program going away as we know it, we stuck together, Cal and Stanford, and at least we found what I would argue was the least bad alternative to stay afloat because we didn't start this fire. But what Oregon and Washington did to Oregon State and Washington State, among other things, is just despicable. That's why I was really happy that Washington State won the Apple Cup a couple weeks ago. That was karma. But it's not good for the kids. And listen, if football wants to do a carve out and do these super conferences because there's so much money and all that, I'm actually okay with that. You could fly charter, and who cares if Cal has to fly to Wake Forest or Washington State? I get that, but every other sport, I hope in a few years can go back to regional. Because imagine you're on the Cal softball team, and now it's the middle of the semester, and you've got a road trip coming up, and it's Virginia Tech, Wake Forest, NC State or something. And now you've got to go fly coach, commercial, connections, maybe double connections, and, be on the road for probably, 11 days in a row just to play those conference games. And, listen, I know that we all make jokes about student athletes and Chuck Muncie and all that, but most of these kids are, trying to make it academically at one of the hardest academic schools in the country, and let's at least give them a fighting chance to fulfill that part of it without being, on the road for 2/3 of the time.
Yeah, no question about it. Hey, Mike, you've had some great jobs, man. It was funny. We were both looking at your senior writer for SI when SI was something everybody was getting, man. It was really cool. You worked at NFL Network for a long, long time. I know you've always lived in the Bay Area, and even now with the San Francisco Chronicle, such a great job. It's got to be fun for you. You've pretty much done it all at the college and professional level.
Well, I remember early in my time at Sports Illustrated, SI sent me down late in Don Shula's tenure, not his last year, but close, and he was struggling, and they basically sent me down to bury Don Shula as a coach, which I would not do. I mean, that's Don Shula, right? And the cover, if you remember on Sports Illustrated, it was Pat Riley and Don Shula, and it said "hot and not." And I got Wayne Huizenga to talk about it publicly, and talk about his job security. And Wayne, I think, was pretty fair about it, so that helped. But here's the cool part. So first of all, Harvey Green, the PR guy, takes me in to see Shula, and Shula comes to, he wasn't getting around so great at that point, but he had some leg stuff, but he comes and opens the door for me, and he goes, "Come on in." Or maybe actually Harvey led me in, and Shula is sitting at his desk, and I go and I sit down, and Shula grabs this remote and closes his door with a remote control. Well, I'm loving this. I'm like, this is going to be great at Sports Illustrated. And he sees my face, and he goes, "Oh, don't be writing that I can't get up and close the door. It's just I'm having some trouble with my leg." And I'm like, no, Coach Shula, this is like, I love this. So the great thing was they sent me down there to just crush them, and they're playing like June Jones and the Atlanta Falcons, and they're going to lose. It's a home game, and they're going to lose, but June Jones mismanages the timeouts and the clocks and gives Marino one more chance. And Marino takes him 93 yards, in a minute, and they come back and win the game. And I end up writing this story hey, how many times have you seen Don Shula screw up the clock and blow a game in his how many years? I'm like, pretty much never. So you could say, he should go and the game has passed him by. There's something to be said for a dude who's never blown a game when so many of these other guys do it all the time.
Well, that's the thing with him. I mean, he was such a detail-oriented guy that nothing could get past him. I mean, he knew every little rule, every little nuance of the game, and it always surprised you when he'd come up with something, and I didn't know that.
I mean, I probably could sit there and listen to you guys tell Shula stories for,
well, there's plenty of them. Believe me, there's plenty of them. There's plenty of them out there. Hey, let's talk a little bit about your book, The Why Is Everything. Now, you spent some time with the new breed of coaches, and I'd like to get – there it is. Look at that.
There it is.
Look at that. There's a nice cover there.
That is a nice cover. It kind of
Very
pops.
nice. Very nice.
For old people like us, it jumps out at you a little bit. You kind of has a dolphin, little.
I see the color in there. We're gonna have that picture on, and we'll put it up on. So the Why Is Everything is a story of football, rivalry, and revolution. But you go with all this new breed of coaches. The Kyle Shanahans from the 49ers, Sean McVay from the Rams, Matt LaFleur from Green Bay, Raheem Morris from the Falcons, and then our guy Mike McDaniel for the Miami Dolphins. All have different philosophies, and you've been around long enough to kind of look at their philosophy as opposed to the old school. You're almost to the dinosaur era back there, not quite to the the Lombardis and those, but certainly the offspring of the Lombardis and the Paul Browns and those kind of guys.
Well, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that Mike McDaniel is the star of this book. I've been talking to him for years and years, back before anyone knew who he was, and I was very curious to see how it was going to go if and when he got a head coaching job. I'm thinking, please win early, because those dry humor, one-liners and stuff might not play. Yeah. And look at him. He's 100 pounds soaking wet. He does not. Yeah. He does not present as your classic football coach. I think you guys know more than anyone. For so long, football has been like, just do what we say. Well, why do we do it that way? Shut up and do it. Don't ask me why. What's the purpose of this? It just works. We do it because it works. That's how Walsh did it, and Hallis, and that's a big part of the culture. And it has changed with this crew. They really want to understand the purpose for everything they do and be able to explain it to the players. And I will say this about Mike McDaniel, and then I want to hear if you guys have a good don't ask why story, because I know you do. But Mike McDaniel, so many coaches over the years for so long, when I'm with them in unguarded moments, will start complaining, right? This guy won't listen to me. This guy can't do this. And Mike McDaniel, ever since I've known him, has always been like, just with a sense of wonderment, no matter how frustrating the player will go, yeah, but let me tell you about this unbelievable thing he does. Yeah. He runs this out route, he'll find something positive in a very sincere way. So he actually, I think more than any of these guys, really does see the good in players. Maybe because as a guy who couldn't even get on the field for Yale, he really is awed by the talent of these people who are performing at such an elite level, but it really resonates.
I agree. I think he is. Yeah. He's that kind of guy, and he is awed, I think, by the talent that he sees out there, whether it's on our team or whether it's on another team. He'll talk about some guy on the other team with with stars in his eyes, because you see it. And look, he dresses quirky. He's got that sweatsuit with the hiked up. He's a tennis shoe guy. He's a sneak. Don't forget, he's
no
a
socks.
Sneaker. He's a sneaker guy, no socks. He likes glasses. He's kind of changing his hair a little bit, and he's different. He's different in the way he coaches. It's the difference in his philosophy. It's the difference in his ways. But I'm going to give him this. He owns it. He owns it. This is not a guy putting on airs. This is hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. This is the way I'm going to coach my thing. And if you don't like it, well, that's fine, because I'm not going to change, because this is exactly who I am.
Yeah, and I think you would agree. The but the best coaches that way are the ones who are themselves, whoever you are. But the guys who are trying to play a role or be something they're not, you guys as players saw through that, more than those coaches would think, I feel like.
No, he's real. And his communication skills are phenomenal. If guys have something they want to add or they think's better, he listens. He doesn't kick them out and that type of stuff. So I agree. I always wondered. So we look at Shanahan. He's lost all these great coaches, right, have gone on, and now he's competing against them. How hard? You got some great stories about Shanahan, and Mike McDaniel, of course, was his offensive coordinator. That relationship when he found out he might be losing his OC.
Yeah, well, the one guy he didn't want to lose above all else was Mike McDaniel, who was with him at every stop. And Kyle trusted Mike to be the run game guru, among other things, and which is cool. It says something about Mike that for all his run game background, as soon as he got to Miami, he was like, you know what? I need Tyreek Hill. Let's go deep.
Right, let's go.
But, Kyle really didn't want to lose him. And Mike had some personal struggles with alcohol that he gets into in this book that he's talked about. And, I think Kyle kind of gave off this vibe to Mike over the years, like, I don't know if you're ready. The pressure could be a problem. Like, stay with me. When it got to the point where the Dolphins were going to give Mike his first ever head coach interview, and still only set of interviews, Kyle went to some interesting lengths, Mike's eyes, to try to muck that up and keep it from happening. And when it got back to the Dolphins people who were rescheduling the time of the interviews because of some complications, their attitude was, man, this guy must really be good if Kyle Shanahan doesn't want to lose him that bad. So it may have backfired a little, but sometimes you want to let your people go off and fly, and sometimes you hoard. And Kyle Shanahan was absolutely trying to hoard Mike McDaniel, which is why there's a chapter in this book called The Liberation of Mike McDaniel.
Mike, I always wonder, too, why we're talking about Mike McDaniel. And I thought he'd take more Shanahan style. And as you just mentioned, he went, no. I'm going to go speed. The fastest team by far in the NFL is the Miami Dolphins. And he's doing it a lot differently. And I think I was surprised. Usually a guy will leave, and Shanahan's been so successful. I'm going to get those kind of guys, those big body guys, maybe the best all-around tight end in football. And he didn't do that. Would that surprise you a little bit? He's doing his own thing.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me that he's doing his own thing or that he's evolved, because that's kind of the ethos of this crew. But it surprised me that he did it with Tua. And again, Mike is an earnest, sincere guy who sees the good. So it didn't surprise me that he was like, oh, Tua, I'll bet there's some great things about him. But what really happened is there was a divide in the organization about what they should do in free agency. And most of the people on the personnel side certainly thought, which I understand, let's get linemen, and let's get, let's get a running game, to complement Tua and get some play action going.
Yeah, right.
And that's the best way to go. But let's spend money on the line. And so Mike wanted to make the case. He knew intuitively he wanted to make the case that maybe getting weapons was the best way. So what he wanted to do was show all the personnel people, look, our weapons aren't, good enough. But as he watched the film, he started realizing that Tua had this crazy ability to get it out quickly, accurately, more than he understood, like some of those throws to the boundary and all that, where he was like, whoa. And he had this crazy epiphany where he literally watched film into the late hours of the night, was texting people at 3 a.m, literally texted Ann Nolan, the PR director, at one point, save this text, write this down, this is history, and called a full meeting at 8 a.m. and showed everyone, including Chris Greer, the general manager, look what Tua could do. This is crazy. And eventually showed it to Tua, and Tua, understandably, was a little suspicious. He's kind of watching this tape like, is this like a prank? Like, are you doing this to, like, is this, what's going to happen after this? Where are you telling me you're trading me? And like Tua just didn't really believe he was that great after being beaten down. So, because of that epiphany, he was able to convince everyone, no, we need more weapons, faster weapons. Go get Tyreek Hill, and that's kind of how it evolved.
Yeah. Wow.
But the answer to the question is yes, I am surprised because Mike McDaniel, while with Kyle, has found a way to run the ball effectively and creatively, no matter who the running back is. Yeah. I mean, you guys will come off the practice squad. You'll be like Raheem Mostert was a great example in San Francisco. Jeff Wilson, a great example. You'd be like, wait, these guys, I've never heard of this guy. He's buried down the depth chart. He just ran for 200 yards. It's like, whoa. So I am a little surprised they haven't gotten the running game going more, but I feel like he will.
So a lot of these coaches now, they're playing the speed game, they're playing the passing game, and even Mike. We had him in a production meeting in one of the preseason games, and he says, until I looked at some of the stats, I didn't realize. He says, I'm a run guy. I'm throwing the ball more than running the ball. And he said, I thought I was a running game coach, which is a little different. But so do you think part of that is that they're playing a different game that the league is set up now, where the rules for the passing game it's easier to run routes. People aren't jamming you along the routes. They're not getting in your way. It's kind of like just getting your routes. So the rules that have been taken away or given to the offense and that hinder the defense to do what they used to be able to do has certainly opened up a door for these young guys to come in and create this very effective, very entertaining style of football.
Kim, I'm thinking of that dinner we talked about off the air. There's this epic dinner that you and I attended that also.
I think I was there.
Yeah, exactly. I vaguely recall, but also involved Uncle Luke from Two Life Crew and the great Dan Marino in all his storytelling, splendor. It was just incredible. But at one point during that dinner, I do remember this. I looked at Dan and I said, "Hey, Danny, under today's rules where they can't really touch the receivers and they can't hit the quarterback, how many yards do you think you would have thrown for?" And he just goes, "A bleeping lot."
He didn't give you a number, huh? He just gave you a lot.
Oh, it was such classic Marino. It's good that I remember 3 words from that meal because the rest is a little fuzzy. But yeah, no, you're right. I think there's a recognition of that. You can score more quickly. I will say this about this crew. Like, some coaches still see it like, well, I've got these 2 menus. I've got my run menu and my pass menu. And, ooh, I think I'll call this play. I like that one. Wow, maybe I'll call this pass. These guys see it as an intertwined ecosystem where everything matches up and they have a system. They're trying to exploit the defensive rules. When the defense adjusts, they counter the adjustment. Mm-hmm. They always have answers within that. So I think ideally for anyone from that Shanahan tree, you're trying to do what you do, exploit the defense, and always, be true to your core. And usually that ends up with balance. And they're better at it for the most part than most, right? Like the 49ers who've had all this success the last few years have been among the more balanced teams, or if not the most balanced team with run and pass. But then again, I think back to the 2019 NFC Championship game. There's a scene in the book where this is at Levi's Stadium. The Packers are coming in. There's a scene in the book where Mike McDaniel tells me before the game on the field, which I'm sure Kyle's going to love reading this. But I'm there for NFL Network and NFL.com. Mike McDaniel says to me about, an hour before the game, you want to look smart? This is how you should frame it, before the game. And he says, not here's our plays, but we're going to attack the edges. And, he said he kind of led me to it. And then that was the game where they set football back 60 years, where Raheem Mostert out of nowhere had that incredible game. George Kittle just sat there on the edge and blocked. And Jimmy Garoppolo only threw 8 passes, including 2 in the second half. And the 2 he threw in the second half were almost like, Jimmy's arm's a little tired. We probably want to warm it up a little. So let's have him just throw a little flip pass out to. But they just basically said, we're running at your edges, and until you can prove that won't work, we're just going to keep going. So, you want balance, but I mean, if they can't stop the run, just run.
Hey, Mike, I always wonder now that through the Shanahan tree, all these guys have been successful, good young coaches, great reputations. What's a relationship with the guys now? Obviously, there's great respect, especially for Coach Shanahan, who gave him the start. But I always wonder, especially when you've got one of them, McVay, it's down in with the Rams and the 49ers in that great rivalry.
Yeah, it's there's a chapter in the book called Enemy Friends. That's a quote from Raheem Morris describing Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay, and enemy first. And I want to assure people on this book, like, I know I'm talking a lot about systems and schemes and revolution. There's a lot of pettiness and, feuding and dirt in here. And I alluded to it a little bit with the Mike McDaniel, Kyle stuff, like tension. So, yeah, I mean, Sean McVay and Kyle are not of this group. Like, there's some real friends in this group. They're friends, but like Raheem Morris and Kyle Shanahan are real friends. Like, they got arrested together, which is also in the book. Like Sean McVay and Raheem Morris are real friends. Mike McDaniel and Matt LaFleur are real friends. But like Kyle and Sean, they got the jobs at the same time, rival franchises. They play twice a year. And think about it. At one point, Kyle Shanahan had a 9-game regular season winning streak over Sean McVay, and there were memes where it's a Kyle Shanahan family photo and Sean McVay's face is like his little son with Kyle with his arm around him,
right?
Which is brutal. But then you realize within those 9 games, there was one other game, the 2021 NFC Championship game, the one they really cared about, and Sean McVay came from behind and won that one and won the Super Bowl that Kyle Shanahan has not been able to win. So really fascinating dynamic between those two. And they, put it this way, when the Rams get eliminated from the playoffs or aren't in the playoffs and a 49er playoff game comes on, it's not like really subtle as to who Sean McVay's rooting for in that game.
Yeah.
He's rooting for anyone but Kyle. Someone I think of the book says Andy Reid can win 20 Super Bowls, but Kyle can't win any.
We've seen Mike, certainly with Raheem Morris, you can see the friendship before the game. They're very close talking to each other. LaFleur, McVay, all those guys that he's close with. They're close. So we're playing the Falcons. It was the second preseason game.
Yeah.
And it's the first. So it's the first quarter, and the Falcons get a play, and they call it short of a first down, and Raheem calls for, he wants to see that new like the Wimbledon thing.
Oh yeah,
the new that they scrapped before the season, where it shows where the ball is. So he called. There's no reason to call for it. He calls for it, and you see Mike on the side go. He's like looking across the field. Go, what? You need to do. So and so he calls it, and it was good. They reversed it, right? So then at the very end of the game, right, there was maybe 30 seconds left in the game, and there's another play on the other side of the field where it was clearly an out of bounds, and Mike called for the same replay, and he's calling for the same and then you see Raheem on the other, and Mike's over here, Mike's just laughing.
Yeah,
he's on the sideline just laughing because you're going to do it. Well, I'm going to do it too. So you can see that relationship, right. And I tell you, Dan Quinn too with Mike is those guys are tight. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Dan Quinn's so proud of Mike because there's in the book, it's kind of heavy in that 2015 season with the Falcons, which didn't go well. When Kyle Shanahan's first year as the offensive coordinator, Mike McDaniel had alcohol in his breath in the morning at work, and Mike LaFleur, who is also part of this group, fellow assistant, and they spent years together in San Francisco later too. Mike LaFleur tells Kyle about Mike McDaniel drinking at the job. Kyle tells Dan Quinn because Kyle's basically been protecting Mike all these years and feels obligated to tell the head coach. And that leads to Mike ends up keeping his job. Dan Quinn's like the best possible boss in this situation.
Yeah.
He hugs him and says, go get help. You're not getting fired. We support you. And Mike ends up going to rehab and turning his life around in the offseason. So it all ended well. But it's funny because when Mike told me about this, he kind of still has this like, Mike LaFleur and I are friends and we're good, but like, I don't know if he was trying to take me out. And I'm thinking that's probably a friend who cares about a friend. Yeah. And when I talked to Mike LaFleur about it, he's like, yeah, I mean, I love Mike. I just was worried about him, but it's such a competitive industry that, Mike, of course, is thinking, well, is Mike McDaniel's thinking, did Mike LaFleur do that with his own career in mind, even though they've definitely gotten over it. And then in Mike's mind, Terry Robisky had just left the Falcons, surprisingly, after that season as receivers coach. So in Mike McDaniel's mind, now I'm going to get to coach Julio Jones. Like, this is the greatest. I'm going to be a position coach. And in his mind, it cost him that. But talking to Dan Quinn for the book, what actually happened is he didn't want McDaniel to be the receiver coach. He was too valuable as kind of a conduit to Kyle and the run game. And so what actually happened with that search is Dan Quinn calls Raheem Morris, who's his secondary coach, and says, can you vet some of these receiver coach candidates for me? Because we're trying to hire a new receiver coach. Just tell me what you hear. So Raheem makes some calls. He calls Dan back and he gives him the report on these promising candidates. And then Raheem just kind of offhandedly says, it's not so much that Kyle needs a receivers coach because he knows receivers. What he really needs is someone who knows him, who he trusts, who can communicate Kyle back to the players and vice versa. And, he just really needs more of that. And then an hour later, Dan Quinn calls Raheem back and goes, well, what about you? And Raheem's like, It ends up that Raheem Morris then switches to offense and becomes Kyle's receivers coach and ends up spending a while on offense, even after Kyle leaves. So I would argue Raheem is maybe the most well-rounded head coach schematically in the NFL. He's literally coached on both sides at that level.
Wow.
We were talking about all these new coaches and all the things that they're doing. And I think that tree is just going to kind of keep blossoming, and the roots are going to kind of keep going through I think the NFL is heading that direction and not turning back the other way. But you still need to deal with some of those coaches they're a little bit old school, the Dan Campbells maybe, the Mike Tomlins, some of those guys, the Andy Reeds and those guys. The dichotomy between those guys and the way you deal with them.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and listen, some of my favorite coaches of all time are old school. Like, I don't want to. I'm just saying it changed, and in a lot of ways it got better, and it's cool that players are allowed to ask why, or even without being asked are told why. But I'm probably if I was physically talented enough and not scared and a lot of other things, not fragile, and could have played for Vince Lombardi, I probably would have run through a wall for that guy, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, listen, there's a lot of different ways to do it. I think you guys would agree. Just, you don't want to be phony. That's number one, right? And so give Mike McDaniel credit. He is being himself. That is not like any other coach who's ever been in the NFL, but that's him. And you just want to be able to say to your players, like, I have a plan. It makes sense. It works if we all follow it. Let's all stay together and give it, do it my way, and let's see if it can work. And if a player or another coach comes to you and says, what about this? At least, be a little open to it. Because Andy Reid says that he got a play from the janitor. Like, that story, right? Yeah. That the janitor, said something to Andy Reid about, hey, I got this idea. And Andy's like, well, draw it for me. Let me see what you got. And the next day, it's like the Good Will Hunting scene, and the next day, Andy's like, you know what? That's not bad. I could work with this a little bit. And next thing you know, the janitor is contributing to the legacy. And by the way, if I had Patrick Mahomes as my quarterback, I would probably accept plays from just about anyone. And just hope that
every day. No question.
Yeah, he'll just make it right.
Go hang around the schoolyard and pick something up.
I mean, like, honestly, like, I'll just be honest. I'm a journalist. I've been around this for years. I've talked to all these people who've done it and coached it. I don't know scheme, right? Like, I don't watch film. How could I possibly know? But I'll tell you this. You put me in that booth with Dan Marino as my quarterback in that era, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be the worst offensive coordinator in the league. I'd be down there going, whatever Dan wants. Hey, tell Dan to just drop back, protect him, and whatever Dan sees. Yeah. And I still think I'd be like, wow, that guy might have some head coach potential.
Hey, Mike, Bo and I sit at practice the last few years, and the game has changed. These practices for summer camp, they're a lot easier than the Don Shula days.
You mean the resort, Club Med? Yeah.
I think some of them bring like that gingham blanket out and that basket, that lunch basket, and sit there and have grapes and wine during the practice.
Yeah, you can. True story. You can order tropical drinks on your phone now. I mean, listen. I would say this. It was too much before. Yeah. I stop me if I'm wrong. Back in the day, a lot of players had to work in the offseason.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, guys didn't come in perfect shape in July because they were, selling insurance or, doing real jobs. And then, the old school mentality was, well, we're going to sweat it out of them. And by the way, 6 exhibition games, 6 preseason games.
Yeah.
Insanity. So it was too much, in my opinion. I started covering in 1989. Now, that said, oh my, 2-a-days, long practices, pads, real drills, got you ready for the season a little better than, week 1 now is almost like a joke because how could it not be? And what amazes me is I'll watch these training camp practices and it's okay, we're going in pads today. 1 practice, probably not as hot as it used to be because we're controlling, we're doing it at 8 in the morning, whatever. 1 practice, it's not that long. It's not even 2 hours.
Right.
Let's say there's 15 periods in this practice. I'm like, okay, I only get 15 periods in pads with this group. And literally it's period 5 and they're doing individual, they've been stretching. I'm like, you're wasted.
Right.
What are you doing? And finally they'll go 11 and 11. You can't hit anybody. You can block, but you can't, you can't crush a guy. You can't tackle a guy, heaven forbid, not just the quarterback, but anyone. So, look, I'm not manly enough to have played football on anything close to that level or maybe any, but I also agree that it has gotten too soft. And I can't imagine you two watching that without.
It gets
different.
What gets me, every now and then we have an occasion to go down and interview, or at least stand and listen to the interviews of the players. And it always gets me. They get about into day, because they don't have training camps, aren't very long. They get into about 3 or 4 days, and there's always one of those guys who goes, yeah, man, we're in the dog days right now.
Dude, tell me what it was like when you're going through a Shula training camp. Explain to me how you felt at exhibition preseason game 3 and then that next week. How did that feel?
It was brutal. It was you couldn't even. But look, I've always said this. They were tough. Really, really tough. But but these players, and I believe these players could do the same thing we did. It's just because we didn't know any better.
Right.
That's what every team did. Everyone went 9 weeks. Everyone did that. Everyone did 2-a-days.
9 weeks. 9 weeks of 2-a-days. And heaven forbid you play special teams. Joe one day.
Back then, you could break your ankle in the first week, and you'll be ready for game 1.
Well, you had a little help with that, I feel.
That's right. Hey,
you
Mike,
just had to go see the doctor, and
maybe kind of about that long. Hey, so before we let you go, we've been talking about the football and the different change. How about your business, the business you're in, and from when you came in to what it was then with magazines, Sports Illustrated. We were talking before you got here. Says I couldn't wait to get my Sports Illustrated every week and see who's going to be on the cover and read the on the record part of it. All those different things, or the people. What is it? Faces in the crowd.
Faces
all those
in the crowd.
things.
Yeah.
And then now you've got so many outlets, and you've got people that are making a living that they've learned the business just by listening on the internet and spouting out their thoughts on something that some people that have never been to a training camp or never been to a practice or never been to a game.
Yeah, don't get me started. So our business has also gotten soft in some ways, and in fairness, the access is worse. And I'm someone whose my entire career has been founded on access and, going to dinner with guys, getting away from it. It was before cell phone cameras, but you establish trust, right? Like trust, like us at that dinner. If you were still playing and I was covering you like a couple years later, I'm pretty sure like we would trust each other not to, like you'd be like, that guy's not going to just burn me because I've seen him practically drooling. And I'd be like, I am going to absolutely make sure I check with Bo on this because that's my boy, right? So, it's gotten harder to have access and to have trust. And part of the reason it's harder to have trust is I don't trust media people. There's the good ones I do, the real ones, but there's all these, people on the outside, these fringe people that are just, I wouldn't trust them if I was in a bar with a player not to film both of us, doing whatever we're doing and put it out there on the internet just for the attention. So I don't like that. I think that the good part of it is anyone can have a voice and you can kind of develop a voice and, you don't need a printing press or, to get out there. But I hope consumers can distinguish between someone like me who at least listen, again, I don't know scheme, but you know what I do know? I know Mike McDaniel and I know Tyreek Hill. So I could go up to them and go, can you help me? Can you help someone dumb like me explain it to even dumber people who really aren't around it? Yeah. But sincerely, help me. What does that mean? And this happened to me the other day. The 49ers gave up a long play to Justin Jefferson. He got behind the defense. And I was asking the corners and the safeties, all of them, what happened. And they didn't want to throw anyone under the bus, but they wanted to help me. And I think it helped me that I was because Charvarius Ward, the star corner of the Niners, goes, "What coverage do you think we were in?" And I go, "Okay, well, back up. I'm not great at this." I said, "But it looked like there was a single high safety." And he goes, "Well, what's that?" I go, "Cover one." And then he just looked at me and he goes, "It was man underneath with a single high safety." And I'm like, "Okay, talk to me like I'm in fifth grade. It goes better." But what I don't like, and I know players don't like it, coaches don't like, and I understand, is that you have this whole analytics community of people who believe that because they can watch all 22 now, that they know scheme as well as these people whose livelihoods are enmeshed in it. And I'm not talking about if Bill Belichick leaves the Patriots and wants to talk about scheme. It's Bill Belichick talk about scheme. But these nerds, who didn't coach it and play it, who think they know what happened and can grade based off it. And then fans take that as gospel. And I'm like, can you really know the offensive line's assignment on this play? Do you really know whether the corner was supposed to drop that guy and give him to this? You think you know, but you don't definitely know. So I try to be really careful with that. But the bottom line with me is it's connecting, it's people. It's harder to get opportunities to connect, but I will still hang my hat on that. And, some of the proudest moments of my journalistic career have been when my reputation as someone who gets deep inside and finds stuff out, but is fair, gets passed down. I was trying to do, this is a Dolphin related story. You'll laugh. So when I was at Yahoo, I was doing a story on Des Bryant before he was drafted, a very polarizing player. And I wanted to watch the draft with him and get with him. And someone told me that Deion Sanders had a connection to him. And Deion and I were not like super tight when he played, but we had a lot of experiences. He trusted me. I wrote a lot about him, and I knew that we had a really good relationship. So I called Deion, and he goes, "I got you. Wait 5 minutes." And then he had this guy, David Wells, his advisor, Dez's, call me and set it up. Des Bryant, the night before the draft, was supposed to come over to David Wells' house and meet me. He was like 5 hours late, but I hung in. And we had this incredible conversation deep into the night. And that's when he told me that he'd been asked in a pre-draft interview, it turns out by then Dolphins GM Jeff Ireland, if his mother was a prostitute. Right. And I waited till after the draft because I didn't want to kill the kid's draft stock even more. But after the draft, I wrote that. And it became a big thing, but it made me, that story got a lot of attention and all that. But what made me proud was that the reason I got that story is because I did right by Deion and Deion's peers. And Deion felt comfortable calling up and saying, trust this guy, he's gonna be on the level. So, sometimes I'll get people to talk to me who either are not talking to other people or are considered unapproachable. Certainly in this book, all these people talk to me, and it's great. And I've actually been on shows or something where people are like, well, why did they talk to you and not anyone else? And my answer is always the same. I am an exceptionally charming MF.
Hey, it's called
that's a great story.
The book is called The Why Is Everything. It's out October 1st. You can pre-order. I would recommend it highly, just knowing you and knowing what work you do. I can't wait to look at to read it and see what it's all about.
Yeah, great stuff, man.
You've been a friend. You've been a great reporter, and whenever I see something that's got your name on it, I always take a look at it, and I know it's going to be the real deal.
Thanks, Mike.
I love you guys. Joe, you and I someday maybe will see the Rose Bowl and Cal, but it's getting harder.
Something. Yeah.
We're gonna try. We're in the ACC, so watch out, Wake Forest. Like we're trying to wrap our heads around these rivalries.
I'm waiting for that Cal North Carolina State game.
Yes,
I'm really looking forward to that one.
I mean, who in America has not wanted Cal North Carolina State on an annual basis?
Exactly.
So, I love you guys, and I'm hoping we can have a big meal down at your way sometime. And I'm hoping I remember more than 3 words.
Absolutely.
But I kind of am hoping I don't.
Yeah.
Also,
don't worry. We'll make sure it's good.
Mike,
I'm going to Uber to that one.
There you go.
Yeah. Safe way to go.
All right.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Appreciate it,
guys.
Do a lot of good stuff, huh?
Oh,
I like having the writers on. They really they've got a lot of stuff in their repertoire, but the access they got, and you, like he said, you got to be a guy that knows how to do your job, know when to give something up, when to keep it behind the window, and he does as good as anybody.
He's been around the NFL for a long time. He's seen all the changes with everything taking place in social media and everything else, and he's made himself relevant. Continues to be.
Yeah. Hey, we're going to keep kind of trying to bring you some very interesting guys. We got some good things coming up. I think we got to get the Blackwood brothers together in a tandem, Joe. How about that one?
The Bruise Brothers?
So, the Bruise brothers in a tandem. That'll be something.
Boy,
hey,
great pranksters.
Hey, if you like the show, continue to watch us on all the platforms. YouTube. You can go to Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you get your podcast. You can go to outpasture.com. And remember, hey, look for these scale shirts around. Everyone's wearing them. Everyone compliments when we wear our shirts, Joe.
These are nice, man.
Nice stuff.
I don't know if you asked them, but this is A+ stuff.
Okay, nothing the best. Nothing the best.
Did you say out to pasturepodcast.com?
Nothing but the best for all us Out to Pasture guys, including you, me, Seth over there's Out to Pasture, and outtopasturepodcast.com if you want to go to our website and see all the crap that we throw out. We'll see you next time.